unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello everyone and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty. 84 days to go and the role of religion in the public square. It's a hot topic these days. Joining me today is Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ryan Walters. Ryan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
I'm your host, Michael Voris, coming to you from Houston. Superintendent, you broke the internet at the end of June when you handed down the order that the Bible and the Ten Commandments must be taught in every public school in your state. Let me ask you first about the criticism. We'll talk about the order and stuff later, but right now it was all the criticism, all the national press you got and all of that, and the directive. What do you think motivates those sorts of attacks?
Well, look, we've seen the far left at this for decades, right? You can go back to the 1960s when the U.S. Supreme Court targeted folks with religious beliefs by taking the Bible out of school, by taking prayer out of school. And you've seen the radical leftists really come together and coalesce around this belief of, hey, look, we're going to drive Christianity and faith out of our schools, and we're going to teach from a just basically atheist perspective and push an agenda onto kids, push liberal indoctrination. And so what you've seen is that continue to fester. And so when we came out, and we're very proud to be the first state to say, no, we are going to bring the Bible back into the schools. Our kids are going to understand the historical context the Bible played in American history. That goes all the way back to the Pilgrims, to Thomas Jefferson, to Abraham Lincoln, all the way up to Martin Luther King Jr. And what you've seen is these individuals throughout our history reference the Bible, reference Scripture, talk about Scripture being a premise for why they are doing the things they're doing, being a real motivating factor for them. Our kids are going to know our history. It's the only way to continue to have America be the greatest country in the history of the world is you got to understand where you came from in order to figure out the path moving forward.
Sure, and you have to be on your Martin Luther King mention there. I mean, you'd have to be insane to insist that the whole civil rights movement and within the black community wasn't Bible-based. I mean, of course it was. It's quoted scripture left and right in practically every speech. Do you give any credence to the line of criticism that you get, or the idea of bringing the Bible and Ten Commandments into schools? Well, my child's Muslim, or my child's atheist, or I don't like them being indoctrinated with Christianity.
No, I don't, because here's the reality. So you can be offended, you can not like it, but these radical leftists, they can't change our history. So we are not pushing a religion on kids. We're not pushing one religion over another. What we are saying is it is clear in our history that the Bible and Christianity played a major role throughout the course of history here in the United States. So we are going to make sure that's included. We are not going to lie to kids and pretend that that Christianity played no role. And that's what we've seen these leftists push for. So again, they can be offended, but we're not pushing a faith on them. We're not telling kids to believe a certain way. What we are trying to do is make sure we're teaching history correctly. And it is of the utmost importance that our kids understand the background of our country. And it's obvious that the Bible and Christianity played a major role in that.
Well, let's talk about the teaching aspect of that for a moment. I mean, many teachers, and it's a big shock, the National Education Association and the teachers unions, they hate all of this kind of stuff. Now, not every single individual teacher, as a person, but collectively, that's what they're training them for. That's when they have their summer conferences and workshops and all of that. There's an indoctrination that goes on there. You comfortable with, an individual teacher being up in front of a group of maybe sixth graders? Kind of, yes, they're fulfilling the law by teaching it, but they're going to be doing it in sort of a mocking way, or kind of the nonverbals and the eye rolls and all that sort of stuff. I mean, are you going to get a faithful transmission of what you want transmitted?
Right. Well, first of all, I will say, Randy Weingarten, they had their big national teachers union conference a few weeks ago. They actually put my face on their screen and said I'm one of their biggest targets in the country, which I just tweeted out and said, thank you. I appreciate that.
These are badges of honor. Everybody on the right used to shake and shudder and, I've said something bad about me and everything. Now it's like, yeah, bring it on.
Exactly. I was like, I appreciate it, Randy. Thank you for that. But what we've seen is, listen, we are going to hold teachers accountable. That's what we've continued to do from when I stepped into office. We've removed teachers' licenses from teachers that said that they hope the next assassination attempt of President Trump, they hope the shooter has a better scope. Well, that teacher's not going to teach in the state of Oklahoma. We've taken certificates from teachers who push pornography on kids. Look, we're not going to allow them to go in and undercut the law, undercut the rules that we have here in place. And so here's the reality. They are going to be academic professionals by going in and teaching the Bible in its historical context. They're not going to mock people of faith. They're not going to undermine it. And frankly, they're also not going to push it and tell kids they have to believe it. It is going to be done in an academic setting. We're going to protect that. Every parent should know when their kid walks into a school, they're going to have professional academic teachers. And we're going to continue to make sure that that is the case here in Oklahoma.
What do you say to people who say, I don't think, okay, that's fine. Parents can send their kids to whatever school they want and learn whatever it is they want to learn. But in a public school or a public setting, and here I want to sort of expand to, state approved homeschooling, charter schools, private schools. Yeah, you can do that all with your kids if you want, but you don't get, public money to do that. You guys had a case in State Supreme Court, Oklahoma State Supreme Court, was more along those lines, but you have a different opinion on that, don't you?
Absolutely do. Here's the deal. You hear kind of the talking points from the left on this, but here's the way you got to view this. These are taxpayer dollars that should go to the funding of taxpayers' children, and taxpayers should be able to direct their funds. So mom and dad, God gave them a child. They should be able to direct where their child gets an education with their own tax dollars. Mm-hmm. And so what we're going to continue to do is say, listen, God gave you your kids. They didn't give it to some government bureaucrat who decides where your kid goes to school. You're going to decide where your kids goes to school. So we're very proud in Oklahoma. We have more school choice options than any other state in the country. We allow parents to choose and have their money follow their kids to public schools, private Christian schools, homeschool options. And we are the first state in the country to have an application approved for a religious charter school. It is a Catholic charter school. We are very proud of that school, that application for that school. We have seen that the Catholic schools here are some of the highest performing we have in the state, and they want to open up a charter school. They have met every qualification to open up a charter school. So we are very excited about that. But we've had some radical left-wing extremists attack it and say, well, we don't want to let them because of their religious beliefs, which completely flies in the face of the religious liberties this country was founded on. So I'm going to continue to fight for religious liberties, and I'm going to continue to fight for parents to be able to choose the school of choice for their kid.
Yeah, it seems to be the whole thing is based on the notion of separation of church and state. Language appears nowhere in any of the founding documents. What do you think? I'm going to ask you professionally, as the guy sitting there at the top of the education department in Oklahoma. What do you think about that whole notion of separation of church and state?
It's a complete myth. It's completely bogus. What you saw is the left use a phrase, again, your viewers will know the background here. They take it from a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist, never been applied the way that they did till they pluck it out of obscurity in the 1960s, stick it in a court case, and weaponize it. They have weaponized a phrase that is not in the Constitution. It's not in the Declaration of Independence, and said, we are going to use this to drive the Bible, to drive prayer, to drive religious liberties out of every public square, including your schools. It's outrageous. The founders would have never stood for this. It is clear from our history as well. And that's why we're going to continue to go back to, frankly, our constitutional origins and say it is crystal clear here that the founders would have never wanted the weaponization of government against religion. So we are going to protect our history. We're going to protect individuals. And so it needs to be flatly rejected by folks across the country.
Yeah, I think that many people may not realize, listening to us, I mean, they might be aware of the letter, but the letter specifically set up the wall of separation so that the government could not impede on religion. The wall was to protect, the religious part of that equation, not the state.
It's almost the exact opposite of what they claim it is. I mean, it truly is, was Thomas Jefferson saying, I'm not going to hinder you. I'm not going to come after you, not the other way around.
Yeah. Are you saying, Ryan, as Secretary of Education there in the state of Oklahoma, Superintendent, that the left distorts things? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll give them credit. They're really good at it. They are really good liars. They're really good gaslighters, where they try to pretend that this is always the way it was. And I think you'll find this amusing. The New York Times fact checked me on all the Bible in schools, and guess what they decided? He's actually factually correct. Until the 1960s, there would have been a Bible in every schoolhouse and every classroom in the country. Sure. That would not have been weird until the 1960s. I go, well, of course that's true, guys. But you notice how the left tries to gaslight the country into believing, oh, there was never any religious belief. There was never any Bible in a classroom. Of course there was. That's an absurd position. I even had a reporter from PBS say, well, how do you know Thomas Jefferson wasn't referring to the Hindu god Vishnu when he said by our creator? I kid you not. And I said, well, thank you for the example here of why we need to get history back in the classroom. But there's not a soul in America in the late 1700s that would have even thought that. But it shows you the absurdity.
So they would have even heard of Hinduism. So
right.
It's the left distorts things. There's a shock. Your directive followed somewhat closely on the heels of the state of Louisiana ordering the 10 Commandments just be posted in all public school classrooms. They weren't actually necessarily teaching about them. Your order seems to go further than what Louisiana did. But the point is, here's another state saying, hey, religion needs to get back in here.
Right. And look, I really appreciate it. President Trump tweeted out, a few weeks ago supporting our efforts here in Oklahoma, gave me a shout out and said, hey, I love what they're doing there. And again, he has really given us this blueprint and this path to be able to go, listen, if it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, he actually appointed originalists to the court who, if they go back and look, and again, we've seen them do this time and time again, you're going to see constitutionally this is permissible. And historically, it was obviously permissible. So, President Trump has really opened up that path for states like Oklahoma to be a leader and say, yeah, we're going to go back to making sure our kids understand our history, that they understand the role the Bible played in our history. And again, it's frankly academic malpractice to push out the book that is cited more than any other book in American history. It's been read by more Americans than any other book in American history. And you guys want to pretend like it doesn't exist or has never had an impact in American history? That is an outrageous position. It's academic malpractice. We're going to bring it back. And frankly, like I said, with the Supreme Court makeup the way that President Trump has allowed it, we're going to be able to go back and say, look, what does the Constitution actually say here? And I think it's crystal clear.
Let's expand on this for a moment now that you bring up President Trump and the Supreme Court. The left might be sort of at a bit of a loggerheads here, because how do they can't push this through the courts because, look, this is a win for you guys. The question would be the margin. I don't think it would be a 5-4. I'm not even sure it would be a 6-3. It might be a unanimous decision. But in either case, it's a loss for them, the big L. So the national election, 2024 here, has all sorts of trickle-down effects. Supreme Court, how the Supreme Court would, rule in cases like this, which again trickles down again to parents and their children in individual, John and Mary with little Bobby there. How important do you think this coming election is?
It's huge. I don't think we've ever seen a greater contrast in a presidential election than we see this year. So we have President Trump that again has put Supreme Court justices on the court that can actually protect your religious liberties, actually protect the rights that you were given, the liberties that you were protected by in the Constitution, given to you by God. On the other hand, you have Harris and Walz, which is the most anti-Christian ticket we've ever seen. Listen to what they are saying about Christianity. Look at what they've allowed to happen on campuses for our Jewish friends, the targeted attacks. Did we ever think that we would literally have our Jewish friends and neighbors say, I don't know that I can send my kids to these colleges and universities out of fear for their safety.
All right.
And then look at Walz in Minnesota. He is the most far left-wing governor that we've seen.
Tampon Tim.
Yeah, we're going to put tampons in the boys' bathrooms. We're going to push for gender surgeries on young kids. We're going to cheerlead BLM as they burn down Minneapolis and tell them leave the police station and just let them burn it down. This is outrageous. The Democrats have leaned in on the furthest left-wing parts of their party. It is outrageous. It is crazy. It is Marxist. And this election is crucial for this country to continue to be the greatest country in the history of the world. You've got to get President Trump and J.D. Vance back in that White House.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to listen to the Elon and Trump X interview? If you were one of 70 million listening live. What did you think of that?
I did. I thought it was fantastic. I love when President Trump talks about abolishing the Department of Education. I'm a huge fan of that. I agree with him completely. Yeah. Your founders would have never imagined there being a Department of Education federally that is telling the states how to run their schools. And so, look, President Trump's laid out a clear path for the country of how we can be economically successful, how we can be that strong foreign power again, where we're not in endless wars, we're not being dismissed on the world stage and disrespect on the world stage, and then how we can get back a better quality of life for every single American. I mean, he has clearly laid out a vision, a path. It is funny watching Kamala Harris and run from any TV interview, even though they're her people, but she's so scared to get a question off prompter. And you've got JD Vance going on every Sunday show Sunday, just going back and forth with everybody. You got President Trump holding press conferences. I mean, the contrast, not only in policy, but also just in leadership, couldn't be more clear.
Yeah. You're sitting there again atop the education structure in Oklahoma. The education structure, education as a whole, as an institution, cultural institution, and the media, those two have been virtually taken over, commandeered, use the word appropriately, commandeered by the left. Do you think it's clear to the voter in the middle? I mean, obviously people who are on the right are already clued into all this, but do you think that people in the middle, that small little number in the middle apparently, really understands the fullness of this, of sort of the cultural invasion that has taken over, particularly in the world of education?
They don't, and I think it's been because we haven't clearly made the case. And that's where I have been telling my counterparts in other states, you've got to go play offense in education. The left has controlled education for decades. And you get Republicans, they get elected, they move the needle that much. And I go, well, the institution is way, way over here, has been completely destroyed by the teachers' unions and the most radical left elements of our country, of our states. And then you just kind of want to tweak things. No. You have got to play offense and bring it back to put the education system back on track. I was criticized heavily by even some Republicans for firing 150 left-wing bureaucrats when I came into this agency. And I just said, no, we're not going to do that. The people of Oklahoma were clear. They wanted a conservative vision for education. We are going to enact that policy. I will not be undermined by left-wing staffers here at the agency. And so we moved. We fired 150 people. We've moved on from that, and we've been able to institute some of the most conservative reforms in the country. We have merit pay for teachers. We have anti-teachers union policies in place. Teachers unions don't run our schools anymore. We've thrown pornography out of our schools. We've put the Bible back in schools. These have all been things we've been able to institute because we got into office. We made a clear case to the people of Oklahoma and now the people across the country to say, this is what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here were the problems. And we've got support from all over the state. And frankly, we're getting support from all over the country from the work we're doing and people willing to see it replicated in their states.
Sure. That's fantastic news to hear. Do you ever hear any very kind of quiet, on the side, down low things from teachers who say, hey, thanks for doing what you're doing. It's my Biden imitation, by the way, there. Thanks for what you're doing. I hate the way this principle's like a left wing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So thank you. Do you ever get those sorts of things just very quietly off the record?
All the time, daily. Here's the reality. They have been so pummeled by the media, by the teachers union, by their administrators. And this is the thing. You hear people talk about teacher shortages and teachers leaving all the time. The media never wants to tell the story of, we have a lot of them that leave because their boss is pushing them to teach some curriculum that's some left-wing nonsense that they go, why would I teach that? I didn't get into the profession for that. Their administrators took discipline out of the classroom. So now their classrooms are running amok. And then 3, you got a teachers union that comes in and pushes this left-wing ideology and then bullies them, targets them, threatens them to stay in line. So what we've done is we've brought more protections for teachers. We've protected their free speech. We've protected their religious liberties. We've said, listen, we want traditional conservative teachers here in the state of Oklahoma. And we've had hundreds of teachers move in from across the country with what the work we've been doing. And we're crystal clear. The people of Oklahoma are folks with traditional values. Our schools will reflect that. We're unapologetic about that. So we want you to come here to Oklahoma. We've been able to support them. And we've been able to bring in a lot of great teachers from across the country.
This is another one of those areas when you talk about, I don't want to say secession, but the separation of the left wing from the traditional conservative. People move, they sell their houses, they go to states and back people like you. Do you see this kind of growing divide eventually becoming more formal?
Look, I see it continuing to crystallize. I see us, what we're doing, getting teachers unions out, but parents in charge, getting discipline back in our schools. And I look at California, they're doing the opposite. Yeah. They've undermined they've gutted all their discipline policies. They've given unions more power. They've continued to push more gender confusion in their school. You're seeing the blue states go further left. You're seeing states like Oklahoma that go, listen, we're going to play offense here for the first time in years on education and move it back to where it should be. And look, folks are going to vote with their feet. Folks are going to continue to flock to red states. Look at what Governor DeSantis has done in Florida. Look at what's going on there. Again, we're doing something similar here in Oklahoma. You see the same thing in Texas with Governor Abbott. And you continue to see folks that go, all right, well, that's the type of life I want to choose. As a matter of fact, I ran into a parent last night from California that thanked me and said, we moved here because of what we saw going on in their school's education. We want this type of education for our kids. So we continue to see this happening. And I think you're going to continue to see blue states suffer because of their policies that are anti-parent, anti-faith, and anti-society.
Yeah, pretty much anti-everything good. That's why we say they're evil Marxists.
That's right.
Superintendent, thank you very much for joining us today. Very great interview. Really good, important stuff here. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, before we sign off today, the Elon Trump interview. Sometimes when a monumental one-off event happens, it takes a little time to process it and reflect on it. Well, that's what happened last night with that interview. Despite a massive intentional bot attack to prevent people from hearing it, from the, free speech people, Elon's engineers overcame the problem and 70 million people listened live. What did they listen to? Well, the two most well-known men on the planet, neither of them politicians, condemning politics being used to curtail freedoms. This is the kind of discussion that the deep state globalist communist New World Order establishment cringes over, which is why they tried, unsuccessfully, to shut it down and prevent you from listening. Their media fellow travelers are already condemning it, saying, how can a man who contributes to the other's campaign conduct an interview? As typical, that's a total off-ramp. Elon said directly in the first 30 seconds it was just a conversation. He's not a journalist. It wasn't an interview. What it was a free-ranging discussion covering a wide variety of topics, like what happens when two dudes sit down and have a couple of beers. They just start riffing. That's what it felt like, with just a little bit of formality to it. The two mic drop comments actually came from Elon. He said midway through, quote, you, meaning Trump, are the path to prosperity, and I think Kamala is the opposite. That's probably not going to do very well over at DNC headquarters. But then as it wrapped up, the greater significance of the election came to the forefront in Elon's mind. He said, we are at a fork in the road for the destiny of civilization. That's why I'm backing you, again, Trump. They must be going nuts in commie land. A man with no real apparent ties to religion of any kind hit the nail on the head, likely without even realizing it. We are at a fork in the road for the destiny of civilization. It's not really about just MAGA. It sort of never really has been. God love you. I'm Gary Michael Voris.